I'm honored to introduce our first speaker for today. The strength of biodiversity in nature can be seen in a myriad of examples. The interconnectedness of natural systems sets examples for how we as humans need to move forward. By looking at just a few of these examples in depth, we can extrapolate how modeling societal structures in natural biodiversity can lead to strengthening societal bonds and healing. What can we learn from better understanding of the natural world around us? Bruno Borsari is an agroecologist who has spent more than 30 years teaching, researching, and consulting in sustainable development, restoration ecology, soil and water conservation, in addition to food security. He received his laureate in agricultural sciences in 1986 from the University of Bologna, Italy. And in 2001, he earned his PhD from the University of New Orleans, in the USA. He taught biology, agroecology, and restoration ecology in various places, mainly in West and Central Africa, but also in Bolivia, Italy, Panama, Louisiana, and Pennsylvania. In 2005, he was a professor of biology at Winona State University, Minnesota, retiring in 2019. He was a keynote speaker for our Earth Conference in 2016, featuring the story of seeds. And we're both honored and excited to welcome him back today. Thanks, Bruno.
We're going to talk a little bit about biodiversity, okay? So conceptually, the concept would be quite easy to explain. If I would ask any of you, what is biodiversity? Probably you would respond, oh, it's just the number of species that make our world. We could close shop and go fishing, right? It is very important instead to reflect on this concept, because already for decades, biologists have been sending out signals that we are losing biodiversity. Okay, and so now the loss of biodiversity is really becoming real to any one of us. When I'm thinking, for example, at the COVID pandemic, okay, on the news, we were learning about, the loss of income, the loss of life, the crisis in the medical field to cope with people getting sick in enormous numbers, and hospitals were saturated. But really, what was going through my mind was, this is really the outcome of the loss of biodiversity. So I would like for you to reflect on this, because as a biologist, finding myself in this environment, it is protected by the temperature outside, okay? We have some food and nourishment maybe to sustain us for the day, but we couldn't survive in this system, let's call it anthroposystem, human-made system, because there is no diversity, right? In nature, on planet Earth, the ecosphere, instead, it is this diversity, the diversity that has been allowing the resilience of a whole planet, okay? The capability to adjust and to recover from any sort of disturbance, small or ginormous, like that big asteroid that 65 million years ago hit the Yucatan Peninsula, and because of that cataclysmic event that released so much energy and who knows what else, an extinction took place. Now, we are learning that we humans are the main driver that, like that asteroid, is leading quickly to a new extinction. And to me, that is mind-boggling. And in fact, you may be familiar with the term Anthropocene. So already for almost 30 years, the geoscience community, okay, is basically using this terminology, the Anthropocene, like the Paleocene, the Pleistocene, okay? We're looking at the stratigraphy of the Earth, where we go and dig out fossils to try to learn how life might have been millions of years ago. This Anthropocene is basically indicating that Homo sapiens is acting like a geologic force. The same geologic force that the geologist would tell you is creating earthquakes and volcanic eruptions as the continent come apart. Incredible. Okay, so we live our life, we live our day without thinking too much, perhaps, about these things. I do, because I have been doing this as it has been my profession, try to enlighten young minds to appreciate biodiversity, to protect biodiversity. So what can I tell you more than that simplistic definition that I just mentioned, for which we could go home and finish with it? Well, biodiversity is an exquisite representation of life in any form. Okay, so through millions of years and adaptation and co-evolution, which is the new idea that goes beyond the theory of evolution that Charles Darwin proposed, okay? What we were taught in school was the struggle for survival, the fittest organism that has the best opportunity at the expenses of the one that succumbed. But now new evidence is suggesting that Darwinism was not totally correct with that idea of diversity, because diversity is cooperative, is synergistic. Okay? It goes hand in hand with ecology. You cannot study ecology without understanding evolutionary biology. And the theme of biodiversity within ecology and evolutionary biology is a keystone topic. It's not only the natural history that makes us understand where all species come from, but is also the understanding of functioning and mechanisms at the planetary scale for which life, like Dr. Malcolm in Jurassic Park said, remember the movie 1993? Life will find its way. Okay? So all the scientists were guaranteeing that the dinosaurs at the park could not reproduce because they had them under control, biologically speaking. But then when one of the scientists with the kids gets lost in the park, they find the broken eggs. So the dinosaurs were reproducing. What did we learn? I argued with my kids over and over as we watched that movie. Because for me, the moral of the story is absolutely life is so marvelous and unknown that even in incredible, drastic situation, we'll find a way to survive. And so going back to the coronavirus of 2 years ago, we got it. We got the virus. We do not even know if it is a living organism or not. But we know that like any other virus, that little bitty thing finds a way to enter through the cell wall or the cell membrane, if you are an animal, hijack your DNA, replicate inside, and the rest, you know, what it may, in what kind of situation it may escalate. Okay, so biodiversity, again, from the micro level, it could be explained as the diversity of our chromosomes, of our DNA. Okay, but then if we look at it from a bigger picture, like the ecological picture, then we are beginning to see diversity in communities. What is an ecological community? It's an assemblage of different populations. So that's why this environment is diversity scarce, because I see, including myself, a large group of Homo sapiens. Okay, maybe there must be, I'm sure, some prokaryotes in the house, bacteria and protozoa and little microscopic things that we do not even see, that we may carry, that we carry also in our hands every time we shake hands. So life is everywhere. Okay, life can be described at different scales. All right, and then of course, beyond the community level, we're talking about biodiversity, going back to that simplistic definition that I gave you, which, if you dig a little deeper, then makes you understand that in different ecosystems, we can count so many different species. But how many? Nobody knows. Nobody knows. We need to go to the museums of natural history, to herbaria, to zoological gardens to get an idea. But with all the limitations in trying to have an accurate number of species in the planet, okay, how many species do you think we coexist with? Are we coexisting with thousands of species, tens of thousands, 100,000, millions of species? What are we talking about? Okay, well, scientists estimate that we may coexist with about 10, 11 million species, okay? Of these 10, 11 million species in terrestrial ecosystems, the majority is made by plants, okay? And that makes sense because plants are photosynthetic organisms. We owe it to plants if we are here today because with their photosynthetic activity, they change the chemistry of the atmosphere for which life evolved into becoming aerobic. So we all need the oxygen and the nitrogen in the air to breathe, okay? But if we look now at the planet from the satellite, from the space station, okay? If I were there and they would tell me that is planet Earth, I would say, no, that cannot be planet Earth, that's planet Farm. What are you talking about? I'm talking about the conversion of terrestrial ecosystem that within the last 70 years has been moving at an accelerating scale to convert the grasslands with the prairies, the wetlands, the forests, the savannas, and any other kind of terrestrial ecosystem into an agricultural field. So that is really a matter of concern. I've been studying these kind of problems most of my life. And most recently, I was in Panama trying to assist local Panamanian agriculturalists to cope with the uncertainties that global climate change has been bringing to that tropical country. Now, Panama is at latitude 7 from the equator. Is considered biologically a hot spot of biodiversity. But believe it or not, at latitude 7, I have been in the Azuero Peninsula. I lived there for 9 months, and I have been visiting a desert. Desert that, according to history and archaeology, might have been man-made. Okay, so we're going back 10, 12,000 of years, all right? But the point is, what did we learn from that lesson? Okay? Have you ever read Joe Diamond, Collapse? Is a book by a biologist that is talking about why through history, civilizations rise, civilizations reach a peak of expansion, civilization disappear. Anasazi, native people in the southwest of America, the Sumerian and Mesopotamian in present Turkey, Iraq, and Iran, and many others, Roman Empire, including. What was the cause? You know, what is the common constant that eventually led to the demise of human civilization? I would argue an irrecuperable loss of biodiversity. Because by losing biodiversity, the terrestrial ecosystem transitions into a drier environment that without plant or without plant diversity eventually deteriorates the soil and accelerates the formation, the transition from a thriving ecosystem to a desert. And in fact, if you stay abreast of the knowledge on the planetary scale, I would challenge you or invite you to watch a great TED Talk by Professor Jonathan Foley from the University of Minnesota. where he explains that in less than a lifetime, we have been converting all above sea level land in farmland. Okay, we have run out of agricultural land, period. And so here is the paradox. As we have the agricultural community that now is saying we need to intensify agricultural production because we are already 8 billion, and by mid-century we will be even 10. Okay, I'm thinking, is this really necessary? Doing it at the sacrifice of converting every spot biodiverse on the planet into something edible. And so that is why if you study these kind of problems, then inevitably from ecology you learn that sure, every organism has to eat. We all eat. And so another extremely important topic within the context of biodiversity is trying to understand how food webs function. So who is eating whom, okay? So it's like if we are all going out for lunch later on, okay? If you are an omnivore, right? And we're going to get some food from some restaurants, obviously you have ample sources of food because you eat pretty much anything, right? But how many vegetarians are in the room? Are there any? Okay, we have a few. How many vegans? Are there any vegans? So if our friend vegetarians and vegans would come out with us, they would not have as such a broad spectrum opportunity of finding available food. And then imagine if you are vegetarian or vegan and lactose intolerant, right? Or maybe you cannot consume wheat or grain products that contain gluten. So what does it mean? It means that trophically, so in terms of nutrition, all living organisms forming a food web have broad niches, like the omnivores, or very narrow and narrower niches if they have some dietary restrictions, okay? So if we begin, we may not even be aware of who's eating whom. But that, as we learn from the biologists, is sometimes the culprit that triggers a cascading effect of an ecosystem out of balance because of the loss of maybe a species, okay, that the biologist calls a keystone species, that, believe it or not, in that trophic web, basically sustains the whole pyramid of all the other beings that every day have to eat something. Like I said already, nature is extremely resilient. And so it is already a fact among biological scientists that in biodiversity there is some redundancy. So what does it mean? If you go to Yellowstone and you think about a keystone species like the gray wolf is important in that particular ecosystem. That's the reason why they have been trying to reintroduce it, because as farmers were trying to eradicate the gray wolf, and major consequences were happening in that particular environment. The herbivore populations, you know, the deer especially, was exploding without a predator consuming some of the herbivores. Nature was out of balance, okay? We don't pay attention too much to these kind of things because again, we also have to eat. And so what has biological value to us? Something that is consumable, right? So imagine plants and meat and other products that we can eat every day. But if we do not appreciate that value, then we don't care about those species. But we are learning now from biology that keystone species are not only the grizzly bear in Alaska or the mighty lion of the African savanna. There are also keystone species, for example, like little invertebrates that sustain the whole food web if you are in the ocean ecosystem. Okay? We are talking about agriculture, for example. I'm sure everybody understands and has had maybe an experience with earthworms, the little creatures that consume the soil. Okay, these are keystone species. Okay, and we understand that the keystone species is not only supporting the food web of an ecosystem, but the keystone species also may provide ecological services that no other species provides. Like, for example, the earthworm is also considered a modifier besides being considered a consumer of maybe microorganisms and other living beings in the soil system. Because by burrowing in the soil, okay, basically churns that organic matter and releases from its digestive system a packet of organic chemical compounds that now farmers begin to understand, especially those who work in organic or ecological farms, what glomalin is all about. Is that magic protein that we find in vermicompost. And so the structure of that system is boiling with life because in one little ounce speck of glomalin, there may be gazillions of bacteria and other forms of microorganisms that feed on whatever element is found on that speck of digested soil excreted by the earthworms. It's all connected, okay? So again, going back to the plant kingdom that grows above the soil, you cannot sustain that forest, you cannot sustain that grassland if you do not have an equitable level of diversity of the system itself, that ecosystem that I would call soil ecosystem. If that soil ecosystem is out of balance, the plant community will be out of balance. If the plant community is out of balance, the animal community will be out of balance. It's all part of a cycle, okay? And so what I've learned with a lifetime of biology is I learned, like Henry David Thoreau said in the 18th century, you know, waste is a human concept. Nothing is wasted in nature, as everything is part of a continuous cycle. And so I'm wondering, why do we have to wait to go to maybe college and major in a science field or graduate school to understand the cycles of life? The cycle of life begins at the elemental level, at the molecular level. Think about the cycle of carbon. Think about the cycle of nitrogen. Think about the cycle of water, just to name a few. These are biogeochemical cycle, all right? Again, from scientists, this is research of the last 10 years, we are learning that the planet Earth, because of biodiversity loss, is also losing these kind of processes. So the hydrologic water cycle is becoming out of balance. The nitrogen cycle is out of balance. The carbon cycle is out of balance. And so this Swedish scientist, his name is Johan Rockström, he wrote a great book in 2021 called Living Within the Systems. If you go on Netflix, you may find also a great documentary that was made out of this book. Because in 2009, he and his team coined this concept, the planetary boundaries, okay? We are living beyond the planetary boundaries. And some of the boundaries are determined by the biogeochemical cycles, okay? So the carbon cycle out of balance is what is expanding the uncertainty produced by global climate change. And in a few days, in Cairo, Egypt, or wherever they are in Egypt, the COP27 once again is bringing together all these stakeholders and leaders of different governments to try to discuss how to reduce or mitigate the emissions of carbon in the atmosphere. Okay? One of the leading causes of carbon emissions in the atmosphere is agriculture. But we need agriculture because agriculture feeds us. Do you see the connection here? So the point is, we live on a finite planet, okay, that is becoming more and more uncertain to manage, biologically speaking. And then, of course, you see what the biology out of balance is going to lead to, you know, social instability, revolution, economic collapse, and the rest. You know what it is: immigration, migration, loss of life. It's terrible. Okay, but we need to reckon with the fact that we live on a single planet. So the loss of biodiversity is a clear indication that we cannot afford any further loss of species. When I think that since 1970, it has been estimated that we have lost almost 70% of biodiversity on the planet, this is mind-boggling. It's like tonight I'm going to bed and you do too, and we might have lost who knows how many species. In 2016, at the same time, in the Northwestern Pacific, a new species of a whale was discovered. So this planet is biologically diverse. It is still, there are still so many questions that we cannot answer, but the point is we need to preserve that biodiversity because that biodiversity makes the whole world resilient, okay? Resiliency to me is a clear indication of a recovery from biodiversity loss. From archaeology, anthropology, when I look at those ruins, you know, of the pyramids in Egypt, or in the Middle East, or in Machu Picchu, Peru, I think that was a loss of biodiversity that was not controlled, okay? Did life end because of those crises that happened thousands of years ago, whether or not they were induced by human beings? No. Will life end on planet Earth? Well, I don't think that that is going to happen anytime soon, because what is happening when we have a catastrophic loss of, let's say, mammals, birds, reptilians? You can be assured that life will find a way. We find a way from the micro world. So microbes, small organisms, okay, in ecology, they are classified as R strategists. So what does it mean? Compared to a human, compared to the elephant, African elephant, you know, we reproduce, we may have a baby in a lifetime. But an insect, for example, when the female of the honeybee lays eggs in that beehive, you know, she lays between 1,200, 1,500 every day. So the biotic potential of the R strategist is ginormous. And so like Louis Pasteur already, you know, the big French scholar who studied bacteria in the mid 18th century, he basically coined this phrase that is still very much vivid in my mind. You know, the real things will be those that will run the world. Okay? Okay, so we need to be very much aware of this because we depend strongly, we depend vitally on preserving biodiversity. And I think that is my signal for stop here. So I will stop here. Thank you for your attention. I will be very happy to answer any questions, comments, reflections you have on this great topic. Thank you. Oh, okay.
Okay, so here's where your brains get to start working right now. So we're going to have anywhere from 3 to 5 minutes for you to discuss what Bruno has talked about with your table. If you're sitting on your own, you're welcome to come over to another table to discuss. You have about 5 minutes to just kind of think about things. The things that we're asking is to think about is what is one thing that stood out for you? And if you can share that with your table members, we'd love to have you do that. I'm gonna go ahead and enter into our Q&A session for Bruno. So and for those of you that are joining online, you can just keep the questions coming via chat. I will fully disclose that we don't always get through all of the questions, but we will do our best, okay? So first one that we have, I think this is a pretty basic one, but someone is asking, what steps can we take in daily life to restore biodiversity?
Excellent question. Begin from your backyard, begin from your balcony, okay? Have you ever figured out how many millions of acres of lawn we have in the United States of America? Okay? It's mind-boggling. That lawn is one species of turf grass. We spray it with fertilizer, we irrigate it. It blows me away. It's unbelievable. I understand you may roll with your dog in the lawn and have fun, but we need to create some space in that yard that becomes amicable also to wildlife. I'm not thinking to bring the camels or the grizzly bear. I'm talking about, the bumblebees, I'm talking about the butterflies, maybe a dragonfly if you have a little rain garden, and invite them to come back by planting native perennial plants, okay? Because another problem, I think, with biodiversity is that we were pretty much all born with nature amnesia. The place where we grew up, we had the stories from our grandparents. And also when they came, I bet, they didn't see an environment that was as pristine as, I don't know, the conquistadors might have seen when they stepped down from their boats in the 15th century, right? So we live with this amnesia. And so the biologist here is trying to communicate with the public to try to bring back nature. If you have never listened to Dr. Doug Tallamy, okay, bringing nature in your garden, that is where would be a great place to start if you want to contribute to improve biodiversity.
I think those are great starting points. What are some developments that give you hope today?
Yes, developments that give me hope are the increasing number of people, okay, that I have seen since I moved as an invasive species from the old continent to the United States of America. And I become native to this place. I have adjusted, okay, because I didn't become extinct yet, so I adapted. So that adaptation that we learn from biology is the resilience concept I was trying to mention earlier. Okay, so what gives me hope is that, number one, life is resilient. So we may be responsible enough to jeopardize the future of our children and grandchildren, but as a biologist, I remain optimist that life on planet Earth will go on without us, okay? And in fact, another great book is Life Without Us. I forgot the name of the author, but it's another great read. I think there is also a National Geographic documentary with the same title. Check it out. Because it shows really the urbanscape, city of New York, imagine Chicago, one day without man interference with the maintenance, 1 week, 1 month, 5 years, 10 years. It succeed, like you learn in ecology, succession into a natural habitat, okay? Very interesting. So I think, yeah, there is motive to remain relatively optimistic, okay? But with that tinge of bitterness in the tongue that say, if I do not behave now, I may not allow my children to have the same opportunity of the good life that I live. And this to me is unacceptable.
Okay, we have, what I'll say is yep. Yes, okay. We're doing this, the Zoom mic back and forth. We adapt. We're adapting to this technology, which I must be getting older because it is way harder than I thought it would be. Okay, so we have another question that I think kind of it's a good, I'm kind of paraphrasing what's written here, and I'm hoping for the person who's asking this question that we're getting to the point. But much of agricultural crops in this area are going to feed animals and not humans. Why isn't the land used for food for people is one of the questions, but I would also add to that, if we know that biodiversity creates healthy soil, if we know that it creates healthy food, why do you think more people aren't doing it? Or why is the farming system the way that it is? Why is the monocropping happening? Hopefully I'm hitting the right points for the people who are asking that question.
Well, this is another great question, and it's very interesting to me because I come from that world, okay? But I don't think that there is any biological or ecological issue in this kind of question. This question is in nature, political, and economic, okay? We have created this ginormous economic, quote unquote, apparently progressive system that we call the global economy, and the global economy has been butchering, really has been giving the coup de grace to small family farms and the whole chain of command, you know, from the USDA to the European Economic Union, etc., has been bowing down to this mantra that you have to get big or get out of agriculture. You get, like Wendell Berry wrote, I remember I read his book, you know, The Unsettling of America, US Secretary Earl Buzz, you know, we were in the 1970s, get big or get out of agriculture. This remains the simplistic solution that somebody who does not do any agriculture, period, but has the power, economic and political, to make things happen, is professing and continues to profess. Now, as a biologist, I'm very concerned because 30 years ago, our great brain invented the genetically modified organisms. So now we can modify them, play with that DNA and make transgenic crops. But did you know that last year the Nobel Prize for Chemistry went to Jennifer Doudna of Stanford University because she invented the CRISPR technology. Now, don't ask me what CRISPR means. It's an acronym for a mouthful, but is translated into gene editing. Okay, so this gene editing, like any other kind of new scientific breakthrough, may have definitely some good things for all of us, but there are also inevitably some drawbacks. So when Dr. Doudna, in her interviews, was very specific, indicating that this great award is to improve human health and save from the misery of inherited genetic disorders thousands and thousands of people, okay? This is very simplistically explained. Now that I'm learning that the same technology is finding ways to become professed as climate smart agriculture, as precision agriculture, and I become a little nervous because we saw what 30 years of genetically modified organisms have done to agriculture. They said it was a cleaner form of agriculture, but no. You plant GMO corn, GMO cotton, and the number of pesticides that you have to use have increased to the point that weeds have evolved and bugs have evolved, and so it's like being in a treadmill.
I think, do we have time for one more? One more. Okay, we've got one more. Okay. Oh. So the question for everybody to know is that there was a book that was mentioned, Life Without Us, but there was a book mentioned previous to that, and he would like to know what that book was. You have so many good suggestions.
Sure. The book that I think I suggested is by Johan Rockström. You are all Norwegian, Swedish, you know, all with the two dots at the top of O, Rockström, and Owen Gaffney. Rockström and Gaffney, 2001, Living Within the Borders, the Planetary Borders, I think is the title of the book. Okay.
Okay, so here's the good news. The good news is that those of you that are here can sit with Bruno during lunchtime and be able to ask him more questions. The bad news is that we have to be done with questions. It's always the hardest part about moving forward with the conference. But hopefully later on in the discussion portion and the panel section, some of those things that some people were asking kind of come to light, and we can explore those further.